I move that we approve tonight's agenda.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We have a motion to approve the minutes from May 1st.
Motion to approve the minutes from May 1st. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. Yes. All right. Next up is school committee chairperson comments. I guess first off, let me thank Jim Forkey for joining the school committee here. So welcome aboard for working with you here.
Thanks, glad to be here.
All right. Also want to take a quick opportunity to thank the MURSD teachers and staff as we've just wrapped up the Teacher Appreciation Week last week. So thank you to all the teachers and staff and for everything you do. It sounds like it was a fun week last week. So again, thank you. And then lastly, I think real quick, it's probably worth calling out that in the last couple of weeks, both of the towns, for the town meetings, have approved the school budget for next year. So thank you to our colleagues on the town side for making that happen. And it was a very collaborative process this year and went well. And we appreciate everybody's help and support with that. So I look forward to moving on to the next one. So next up, we've got community comments. I don't see anyone in the room for community comments. Sam, anybody online?
I see no hands raised.
Okay. All right, I think we can go ahead and move over to student comments. Yeah.
So I have two comments to make. The first one is that there's an AP Summer Bridge program to cover the gap between the fundamental high school level courses and AP courses. And this runs 2 weeks. The first week is 31st July to 5th August, and the second week is 7th August to 12th August. And my second update is that there's a summer enrichment academy for kids entering grades 2 to 8. This is to provide continued learning outside of the classroom. And this runs from July 17th to August 10th, Monday through Thursday. So,
Great. Thank you. All right. Let's see. I guess we can move on to superintendent and administrative comments. Dr. Cohen?
Right. So we're not going to let Dia get away without a formal, embarrassing recognition for her service. So you are one of the first of all of our students who have been here 2 years, all the meetings, stayed through as our student rep and being part of the school committee. So I know on behalf of the whole school committee and community that we are so thankful for your time and your insight.
Thank you.
With everything that active students do today, that's a lot. That's a lot that you gave to back, and also in the beginning, all of the work that you did to try to get input and go to schools and all of that's great. So we have a special surprise for you. Celebratory wrapping paper. There may or may not be Mendon-Upton gear in there.
All right.
Part of our marketing and branding to continue it when you go off to school. But please come back and visit us until it's safe to done. But I'm going to miss having you right next to me here. So makes me sad.
Great. Thank you. Can we ask you real quick what's next?
you must send this.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Very nice.
Awesome.
And I had another item as well, just to give an update on where we are with strategic planning. I've been trying to have this to be updates for all of you as we go through the process. And our next meeting is May 22nd. I know I said this last time we met that we're going to be coming back to strategic objectives and initiatives. And so what we did last week is we met as a leadership team, and we had 2 drafts of objectives from the last meeting. And so we have the third iteration of a draft. So I wanted to share those 4 categories of objectives. So these are not final, but that we can kind of hear where we're heading in some of the categories. And then these will be brought forward to the committee when we meet next week. Is it next week? Yes. Okay. Messing up on my dates lately, right? So on the 22nd, we'll be meeting, and then we'll be prioritizing the initiatives that fit into it. So the first one is currently focused on deeper learning to create opportunities where every student will experience relevant, future-ready, and personally meaningful learning that will help them to develop and reflect on the portrait of a learner competencies. We have a number of initiatives that were brought forward from the community related to authentic learning experiences, connections, internships, work-based learning, and portrait of a learner competencies, bring them to life. So a lot of those initiatives would fall into that kind of category. We have another category of high quality instruction to develop embedded systems and structures that enable data-driven decisions, aligned curriculum, and high quality instruction for each learner. When I get to giving a mini presentation on the DCAR, the accountability review, because it's a 90-page document, as you saw, I do recommend that you read through it, but I'll give some highlights. But some of it related to instruction, we're going to be continuing a fair amount of the work into the next stage that we've been working on and you've been hearing about around building our data systems and assessment systems and alignment with curriculum in the Tier 1 instructional practices. So you'll see those initiatives show up in that category. Next category is equity, inclusion, and well-being to build programs and practices that ensure each member of the school community is known, valued, celebrated, challenged, and access what they need. And so that's where you would hear some of the work around continuing focus on well-being, belonging, equity, social, emotional learning, our expanded supports for mental health. All of that is going to fall into that category as we narrow down into groupings for next steps. And community relations, still don't know if I like that kind of header, but that's where I'm at as of last week, to foster community partnerships through collaborative plans and strategic engagement that ensure that the district has sustainable funding to provide the facilities and resources necessary to support student learning. There's no surprises that will really show up in that category. It's about capital planning, it's about facilities, it's about fields, it's about we always have something around communication and engagement with families, and also some of it, and we'll figure out what category, because we have some outliers of work that have come through. For example, really looking at schedules, our resources of time and logistics and buildings, and how do we maybe align schedules across buildings, so we have to figure out where that might fall. But those are the broad categories that we're at, and we'll come back with our next iteration as we move forward and get feedback on those as well. We just want to keep in the loop on that, but we're making great progress and feeling good about having at least draft language. I joke and say we won't have the really pretty fancy document, by the end of the school year. That'll be work over the summer for the presentation aspect of it, but we'll have the content. Any questions on that?
What's the remaining timeline for the presentation to the committee and the approval of that?
Yeah, so we have, so our next meeting with them is May 22nd. So I'm hoping to have a good draft of the initiatives coming out of that meeting. And then we have a leadership team meeting that's extended, more beyond. Usually we meet for about 2 hours. On June 5th is when it's scheduled. And so we were on that day going to kind of put it together and do another draft of that information. And then, so if we have it done, it could be on that first June meeting. If not, it's going to be at the June 26th meeting for the information. But as we go and narrow the content, I'll still continue to give you the updates so you're familiar with the work that we're doing. And if at any point you want to see any of the working documents, I know over time, sometimes I've shared like our agendas. I'm always happy to do that. I know you're not all at the meetings, but I'm happy to share too. Yep. All right. Next up, Jay, could come on up for an update.
Hi. All right, how's everybody doing tonight? I hope you're doing well. Sam's going to put up something. We're just going to talk about where we are this year and a little bit about next year's budget. You have the year-to-date report that you were linked to. It's the standard report we do every month. Let me just touch on a couple of things that are there that I'm noticing as we get to the end of the year. We're helping animals for starters.
It's not.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
There we go.
There we go.
All right, so on the revenue side, there's a couple of things that are trending higher than anticipated. One is, go to the next one, Sam. One is the vision program. As you know, we stopped that vision program this year, but we got a payment in late August, so we couldn't credit it back to the previous fiscal year, so it came in this year. So that's almost $20,000. That's just additional revenue at this point. Medicaid reimbursement, we budgeted $50,000. Right now, we're at $116,800. I do believe we'll have at least one more payment before the year is out. But just as is right now, we've got an additional $86,612 in additional revenue that we didn't anticipate a year ago when we did the budget. The other thing, and I didn't list it in here, is we typically get additional transportation money on June 30th when they do their final payment. We won't know that till June 30th, but sometimes that helps as well. The other side here, the charter school, I think I talked about this when we did the budget process. The cherry sheet showed that we were going to get $357,800. The reality is we're only going to get $301,500. That's because we went from 20 students that they had on the cherry sheet to 17 when they did the counts in October. The corresponding reduction in tuition costs, the corresponding reduction in transport area and reimbursement was around $56,000, so it kind of matches off and brings it down, so it doesn't really impact the budget. The one thing I did notice, though, is that based on the new numbers, we're only getting about 29% reimbursement for the cost of charter school. So charter school does have an expense that we pay for. We've got, as you know, 17 students right now. I don't know what we're going to have next year for reality. So these numbers that we had in the 24 budget could potentially change too, and we'll find that out probably in December. So it's about 6 months out. We also have some appropriations made last year that we're not going to have to use all those funds. One is in school choice. As you know, we appropriated $800,000 in school choice toward teacher salaries. Right now, based on the encumbrance, we're going to need about $686,000. So that's about $113,000 that we shouldn't have to spend. Same thing with the grant. Excuse me. The carryover from the 240 grant and the entitlement grants. There's about $183,000 that we had allocated that we're not going to have to use at this point. So that will carry over into next year because we can do that with the grants. All of that basically provides at this point a cushion and a protection for us in case things come up next year that we can't anticipate right now, which will happen. We know that all along. So that's basically as far as fiscal 23. The only other thing that I have here is building maintenance. I've talked several times. We've had some major expenses in general maintenance and HVAC control systems to the tune of about $110,000. But I think I'm safe in saying tonight that we're all set with snow removal for the year. So we have about $106,000 that we budgeted that we're not going to have to use, which will help cover some of those expenses. There's a lot of other maintenance things. Some are above, some are below. But these were the biggies, the three biggies that I'm seeing right now. We still have a lot of things going on in the buildings, things that are breaking. I mean, the elevator in this building needs some work. It hasn't worked for the last couple of days. It seems like there's always something. I've talked about it a lot. But in general, I think we're in okay shape for FY23 at this point. Before I go on to 24, is there any questions on the 23 part?
Well, that shows you're short, right? Snow removal doesn't cover everything.
Yeah, we're about $10,000 short. We'll be fine. In a $40 million budget, I'm not too concerned about that.
I was just gonna say that, right? You put all three slides together, you're in that less than 1% range,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's
We're in good shape, and I think we're going to finish fairly strong again. I think part of that is because we've got positions we weren't able to fill.
Yeah.
Some of it is the carryover grants, things that we've been able to use grant money for that we didn't have to use operational money for. All that helps. All right, so FY24, as you know, we're at the the Senate Ways and Means budget right now. So the biggies that we've noticed, Chapter 70, the governor gave us $30 a student, the House and the Senate upped that to $60 a student. So that'll be an additional $60,000 in revenue that we didn't certify at when we certified our budget. So we will have to recertify, probably. We usually do that in August. We have to wait for the state to actually finalize their budget, which is mid-July in most cases. But we're looking at probably an additional $60,000. I'm pretty comfortable that that's going to stay. That typically the governor goes low and the House and Senate go up. Transportation, that's the thing that's really bumped up. So the governor had us at about little under 1.4 million. The House put us up to 1.8 million. The Senate brought us down to 1.7 million. It's hard to say where that's gonna land, because that's based on a reimbursement rate, but right now, we have the potential for an additional $331,000 in transportation reimbursement. Again, we won't have an answer on this until probably the second week of July is usually when the governor comes out with that budget. So that's a good sign, though. These are all positive trends. Charter tuition, it's up a little bit as well, but again, the reimbursement, that will all get adjusted as the year goes on, so I don't get too worried about what I see on the cherry sheets, because what they put on the cherry sheet is never what we end up at, ironically.
So in general, right now, where we stand with the Senate Ways and Means budget is we're looking at another
$409,000 in potential revenue. That's a positive sign. As you know, there were positions we didn't put in that we are going to need to put in, so this will help us in that area. Again, we'll have to let it all play out first and get to a final budget, and then we can start to decide which way to go as far as positions and things that we didn't fund in the initial budget. And I think that's about it. I don't know if there's questions that I didn't touch on, or if I confused everybody, or.
When's the next date for the cycle for the state?
I was told, well, they will go to a joint conference committee now. So the House and Senate get together and they sort of compromise, but they tend to come up with an agreement pretty quickly. I expect that probably by the end of May. Then it goes to the final version, so the whole House can vote on it. That'll happen sometime in June, and then go to the governor. Theoretically, the governor should do this before July 1. That would be the way it's supposed to work. It's never happened, so I don't expect it to happen this year either. Especially where they were late getting started. It could be that, last year, I want to say it was maybe the end of July when they finally came out with the final budget. You remember a couple of years ago, I think it was September when they came out with the final budget. But I think, the pandemic is no longer consuming everybody's lives, so I think maybe they'll get back to getting this somewhat on time. But we don't have a lot to say over that. They do what they do. Anything else?
No, I think maybe my only ask is maybe at the last meeting of the year, it might be interesting to kind of have that ongoing living document of like, here was the April kind of incremental we were put together. We whittled it down, I don't know, call it May, and then we worked with the towns to understand their budget, that got whittled down a little. And so you almost have like three versions of where we started, where we hoped, where we ended up. If we're 400K favorable, it's like, okay, which ones kind of go back? And I get the environment changes, right? Missions are adding, students are coming in. There's new things we know today we didn't know 90 days ago. But I think it'd be interesting as we wrap up this session, school committee meetings this year, to look at saying, hey, if we're going to go in this direction, here's the ones we're going to add back.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can tell you right now, just from our enrollment numbers at Memorial, where when we were saying, what are typical class size numbers, approximate that we'd like to have, they're trending up higher already across a couple of grade levels. So that was the next one where we had two and we dropped down to one. That would be the immediate one that I want to address right away for sure. So.
And then we were going to do something funky with the 6th, 7th, 8th grade, right? We were going to go with that odd size team and kind of disrupt people's specialties. I'm curious to see if we add in, we get our class numbers right back down to where they belong and can maintain the core competencies of the teacher.
How quickly can we get those positions posted once we know that we have the funding for it? Because I know posting positions in July is
Yeah, so
a challenge.
my intent would be particularly for that classroom position at the elementary would be, where are we at for the date? We're 15th, so we're waiting for these latest numbers to come out. We wanted to present them to you, and then I would want to go forward relatively soon to fill at least one of those positions to add back in. That way, that does impact their scheduling at the elementary too, and rooms, and it's kind of a trickle effect, but I know that's a priority that's come up from across the board. And then we can see, but we don't want to wait. We're not going to wait until July. If we know we have that amount, we want to see where do we want to invest in, like you said, take a look with the team as well. If anything else has changed or what we've adapted to as well.
I'm fairly confident that, we may not get an additional $400,000, but I'm pretty confident that it's probably going to be at least an additional $100,000 when it's all said and done. The one position that Marie was talking about, we can probably post that safely now. But the rest, it's hard to say because you're taking a little bit of a gamble because, the other thing that's going on at the state level is I'm hearing that the state's saying revenue in the last quarter
It
is
just
down
went down.
considerably. So that makes everybody kind of, shy
Sure.
about spending money, so, you never really know. I mean, if we got a new governor, I'm sure she doesn't want to have her first act be to bankroll the state. So she's probably gonna try to do the best she can.
And I think it's important to look at, we did increase too in areas of E&D and other areas. So I think it's important for us to look at how we're
Right.
ending, in the next month, how we're ending the year, even though I don't imagine it's going to change too much from what you just presented, but to see where we're ending and see where we might land with that and whether or not we would need to allocate as much as we said we would there too. So that's another, that would then help us in the future.
Yeah, because by the end of the month of June, I'll have a good handle on where I think E&D is going to end up. How much of the school choice appropriation we actually do have to use, because again, if we have money left in the budget, I'm more inclined to try and save that money in the choice account where we have more ability to use that money than put it in E&D. So there's lots of things that we kind of play with when we get to the end of the year to try and make things balance out. And it's all just a matter of where we end up. I know one thing that's really helped us is we got 2 grants for the water treatment systems at Bluff and Nisco. So where we had budgeted for some fairly big expenses, we're now getting about, $110,000. We're not getting all the costs, but we're getting a lot back. So that will help us as well.
I think my only closing comment on it, there's a lot of work that went into that whole April-May plan, and if you feel like you might have the dollars, I think I'm only guessing, but it's easier to raise the rec and then not fill it versus putting the rec up 8 weeks behind everybody else.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And do you have when you graduate, get in touch, and we'll see if we have an opening. Ready to retire, just move right
We
in.
were already
Move
started
that seat to this seat.
Looks like you got a good recommendation. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Now we have Dave Quinn and Sam O'Neill, Amy Townsley, Brett Kaler, and Jamie Sims. They're going to be presenting tech integration update. And I was like, what are they not?
Is that awkward, Dave?
Britt says she wants to come all the time.
And before they get started, I want to use this time just to publicly thank Dave Quinn, who has been amazing and left such a legacy here in the district, but I know I've informed you, and he's informed people internally, but he is taking a new role as assistant superintendent, and we're really happy for him, and he's going to be amazing as he is every day, and he'll be sorely missed, but we have his number, so I'm going to not be a stranger in the transition, but just wanted to publicly honor him and thank him for the work that he's led in the many changes in our district.
When's your last day?
June 30th.
So we're gonna make him come in on June 30th.
Denying every.
Ninth is when the iPads all crash.
We're in good hands. We're in good hands.
Congratulations, Dave. Seriously.
Thank you. In light of Dr. Cohen's comments, I'd like to ask for a little bit of latitude before I start the presentation. I promise if you grant me this, you'll never have to hear from me again. I first want to just say how much I have appreciated this committee, who has always made me feel both supported and appreciated. And having served in this role, I know how difficult and challenging your job can be, being advocates for the schools and also the fiduciary responsibility you have to the community. And even in doing so, I've always felt like you were behind us. I also want to take a moment to recognize Dr. Cohen, who has been a mentor, leader, friend, and just absolutely outstanding supervisor. I felt that from my second year. To the extent that I've had success here, it's been because of your unyielding support, your willingness to lend both a critical eye and to design a pathway for success and get to yes. And I just want to let you know that you have made this place a magnificent opportunity and environment to both learn and grow. I'm also grateful that when you have such a close relationship working with assistant superintendent, you don't know who that next person's going to be. And then we had Dr. Kirkpatrick come in and just took the baton, and it's like we never skipped a beat. And your supportive, collaborative approach in working with me on my projects has just been so appreciative. My only regret is that we didn't have as much time to work together, but I hope we'll continue to stay in touch. I also want to recognize my fellow leadership team members who are forward-thinking, supportive, kind, generous, and always student-centered. They have left an indelible mark on me and made me a better person and a better leader. So Jay, Jen, John, Marianne, Jen, Nick, Wendy, Lauren, Liz, thank you for all you've done. And Jan, Deb, Dennis, and Ann and Paul, I'm grateful for you all too. My tech team, so Sam, Chris, Liz, Felipe have just been models and exemplars for what service can be. You have made all of the work possible. And Joe, who's been just a phenomenal partner, who complements my skill set so well and has helped me to grow as a leader. And then finally, the people that are sitting here in front of you and right here behind me, students and colleagues who are dedicated to the growth of this district, to putting forward an outstanding educational experience, who are progressive and candid and kind, who have helped me to learn and serve them better. So I think I'm at my 3 minutes. If I want to go over, I apologize because this is my public comment. But I find that gratitude is best when expressed. And Mendon-Upton is a hard place to leave, but a great place to depart from. And I'm confident that whoever comes in behind me, we have a great reputation for attracting outstanding people. And I'm sure the next person will be equally stellar, to the extent that I was. Well, without that, I'm going to turn it over to our spring technology review. This is a photo from our trip, or Mrs. Kaler's students. They went to the Phillips Research Center a couple weeks ago because her automation and robotics team won first place at the Applied Learning Showcase. When was that? Back in?
It was, like January.
Back in January. So, and then we're heading this Friday to the second Applied Learning Showcase. We got 30 students from Nipmuc and MISCO heading up there. We couldn't take more. We filled as many as we could. They capped it. But we had a great practice run today, which we'll talk a little bit more about. So, Sam, we go to the next slide. So what I want to talk to you about today is this team here in front of me. So we've got Sam, Britt, Jamie, and Amy, who are all part of the Massachusetts Peer Learning Cohort that was put together by DESE and the Learning Accelerator, who we partnered with on a couple different projects. And next slide, Sam. So the Peer Learning Cohort is a group of 10 districts from across the state that are focused on really diving deeply into their ed tech tools and processes to make them more equity-driven, centered by the stakeholders, and to make sure that we're really investing in what matters most to us. So again, this is kind of the EdTech Systems Guide. So it's a 3-part process looking at selection, implementation, and where we kind of are being a one-to-one district for so long is the evaluation. That's kind of where we started off with our focus, but we're going to talk a little bit about how that shifted based on the perspectives that we have here. And amongst, just back here for a second. So framing this process, you want to make sure that you center equity, consistently engage the stakeholders, the end users, and then ensure that there's an alignment to your vision and your work. And I think one of the big features that we have here is that we have student representation. We're the first and only district to have a student who is part of the team. Jamie's quote is here in a blog just about the impact of being on this program, but they ranked kind of different models by low, medium, and high student involvement. Mendon-Upton was ranked highest in student involvement, almost to the extent that Cambridge shifted their entire approach from like looking at it from just from a teacher standpoint to building in student, and Jamie was the result of that, so kudos to Jamie. Jamie, when you were asked to give a quote for this blog, what did you have to say reflecting on that experience?
I don't remember my exact quote. It's too small on the screen for me to really be able to read it. But I talked a lot about how at the end of the day, the point of school is to help the kids learn. And as much as you need teachers and all of the other people in the administration to help the kids learn, you should take into account how the kids want to learn and what is best for them at the end of the day and what they want, especially when you're looking at the high school level where kids do know what they want for the most part. So I thought that was very important, and that's why I was very thankful for you guys having me.
And so not only was Jamie along for ride, he was an active participant in the discussions and in our Zoom sessions, so he wasn't afraid of the stage that he was on. But that led us into kind of thinking a little bit more, say the next slide. It was an evolving line of inquiry. So we started off firstly with, how might we better evaluate our tools? But then as this group came together, we started thinking a little bit more differently and broadly. So Britt's contribution to the conversation was focused on how do we communicate about the tools that we have. Britt?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I just want to say, Dave, as the Director of Technology and Integration, I mean, we've talked for years about different platforms and apps that support my students, but also have supported me and made me a better teacher. So Dave and I have been working together for a very long time, and I'm incredibly grateful for all of his help. But specifically at the beginning of this year, so I started teaching technology 3 years ago. So at the beginning of this year, I wanted to switch it up a little bit and use some different apps, and I was looking to do a particular project. And I looked in the self-service with all the apps that I'm flipping through, and you can flip through for a very long time, and I'm realizing I don't know what a lot of these apps are. I don't know what the sketching apps are versus the video apps. We have a lot of tools, which is great, but we don't know what all of them do, and I don't know who is using what. So they're talking about, well, what do we have here and who's using which apps and which ones are better for our students? So that led us into a much different direction.
And then from Britt's comment, we also had Jamie who brought us into kind of our third line of inquiry is how might we look at the better consistency of what the tools that our students using from class notes? Jamie, do you want to expand upon that?
Yeah, this happened really, it was probably our September or October meeting where this first got brought up, where when you talk to a lot of kids of what tools they use, it's going to change an incredible amount from elementary to middle school to high school. And some of that change is natural. As you get older, you'll use more tools and stuff. But even if you're looking at the high school, like I used a different notes app in my history class compared to my math class compared to my science class. And it's just to a degree that gets silly because I spend as much time worrying about how I'm going to be able to navigate the notes app that I'm using as I do about the content of the notes app. So looking through age groups and through classes, we wanted to make sure we tried to give students a consistent database of what tools they were going to use, so that way they could focus more on learning the information they were meant to be learning rather than how to use Notability and Google Docs and a million other options.
And Amy's contribution to this conversation as the library and digital media specialist, as somebody who works across the high school and then takes as a handoff from 8th grade into 9th grade, wanted to have a better understanding of what the skill sets were coming in, but then also thinking bigger picture about implementation. So Amy, just want to talk about some of your perspectives coming to this conversation.
So I'm going to start at kind of maybe an interesting seeming entry point, but it will make sense. But I think one of the questions that helped us get to Portrait of a Learner was thinking about how we can ensure students have the skills and tools they need in a very rapidly changing, diverse, and interconnected world. So we enter Portrait of a Learner, and we're talking about communication skills and innovation, and technology was kind of framed as the connecting of the dots around that for the call to action around the Portrait of a Learner. So when we were talking about this, it was really, we wanted to make sure the consistency with the student experience was there, and that there was a consistent and very transparent process for how we were evaluating, implementing, and sharing what we were learning, so that there was kind of a way to build that trust and transparency, and at the same time aligning it with our bigger goals.
And Amy has been really helpful in helping us to kind of see the big picture and push. One of the other lines of inquiry potentially down the road is taking a look at the implementation process and how many of the challenges we might be encountering as due to implementation. So I've always appreciated Amy's ability to kind of see things from different angles. But so how do we go about solving these? And this is where Sam came in, and we shared this with you, is we learned from Chickpea, again, this is part of the cohort, about this great tool called Airtable, which would help us to catalog our tools. So Sam, you want to talk a little bit about your work there?
And we worked, we had several meetings with Nick from Chickpea, who's he's the director of technology.
Yes.
He was, his ability to be able to navigate these types of platforms is truly amazing. And we definitely could not have gotten it to where it is without his help. So we use a database called Airtable. It's a form of Excel with the focus on providing a little bit more of like a user-friendly interface. So what we do on the back end is be able to input different fields, like the name of the app, how many users are using it, the logo, different tags to kind of identify what does what, and then put it in these nice, you can see these nice, I can click on. I'm so sorry. They put these nice cards in the front, and you can scroll through.
Let's stop and just kind of walk through. Can you go back up to the top, Sam? So just trying to put some categories on here too, and just articulating for teachers and endorse. So what are we paying for versus what's supported? Then we try to give teachers a category. So is it an instruction tool, a curriculum tool, an assessment tool? And then Sam also got some descriptions down. Sam, you want to talk a little bit about how they got the descriptions?
So there's been a lot of talk about ChatGPT. We use ChatGPT to be able to provide those descriptions and provide the tags to be able to allow students and teachers and staff to be able to filter those. So using a prompt, I tried a prompt in the beginning that was way too simplistic and it didn't provide me what I needed. Dave gave a cohesive prompt to ChatGPT that gave something completely usable. Like it provided a bunch of tags per app that actually made sense comparatively to the ones that I put in there. So it's interesting because you can see each of these apps have a number of tags that were generated based on the website that it's coming from, the iTunes store page that it has, and then provides something that teachers and students can filter by based on whatever they're trying to find. And this is all done through a pretty comprehensive database in the back end, and then just kind of filters it by this.
So teachers can see who's using it, what grade levels, what buildings, and that they can communicate with their colleagues. It's also updatable so that teachers can submit when they're using a tool. And so it's going to be a living document, but more condensed than what Brooke was talking about with a 250 app tool catalog. So now that we got that piece in terms of documenting, can be able to communicate. This all went out to teachers on Friday. We turned our attention to the evaluation piece. And again, focusing on evaluation. And so building an evaluation tool was more challenging than it would have seemed because there's not a lot of resources about that. So the more people we reached out to, we found that there was less resources and we were gonna have to build our own. We experienced the frustration of trying to navigate through our core values to try to get something that didn't give people a popsicle headache. I think we started with like 20 criteria at the beginning, and then how does that look for students? But we, expanded our experience, both the challenge of being stuck and the joy of being unstuck. We talked to quite a few internal critical friends. Tap the next one, Sam. So thank you to all of our colleagues who weighed in on each of our evaluation tools. We tried to make this, again, collaborative, stakeholder-driven process. And then we also reached out to a lot of external stakeholders to give us feedback on our work. So we must have gone through, 500 drafts before we got to what you saw here. And go on. So shared with you and shared with colleagues are two different versions of the tool. We have both a feedback tool that allows for students and teachers to give their input on how frequently they're using the tool, what kind of impact does the tool use, what kind of pedagogical stance. Is it mostly just to collect assessment data? Is it used for creation? Is it used for both? Trying to aim for Swiss Army knives that do a little bit of both. Would you recommend this to someone else? And then also thinking about the impact from a student standpoint, what's the user experience like? Is this clunky to use? Is it difficult to use? Are you using it outside of school, right? So, or is this just located, you only use it in class and you never think about it again, as compared to some of our art apps or our Tinkercad apps that kids are using on their own time. We're also putting together a digital tool pilot proposal, so for teachers to be able to submit tools at different times of the year to consider for funding for a pilot. And then as we move forward, we'll work through a process for how we'd like that all to shake out. And then just kind of the road ahead, in late May, early June, we're going to put out a couple tools to get some feedback. There will be no changes in tools for this upcoming fiscal year, just because of our budget cycle, and also we want to give teachers time to adjust, right? But we also want to put them on kind of on notice and say, hey, listen, the feedback that we're getting from our colleagues and our students, this is not the most beneficial tool. If something changes in the fall, then we'll resurvey again, but giving them ample time to adjust practice, but also grow support for the tool. In early June, we'll have our showcase with the rest of our peer learning cohort. In mid-June, we're going to share the tools and resources with the DLT. And then late June, just here. Late June, we'll share the results from the teacher feedback, and then there's a potential for this work to continue with the state and DESE in year 2, but that's dependent on funding. And then just to kind of close out for this group, any final reflections? Yeah, for me, okay.
Oh, yeah.
I talked a lot, so I wanted
I thought it was just, it was so interesting to be able to work with the other districts who are also kind of struggling in a similar direction, like in a similar way that we are. But it's also really interesting to be able to see the differences that we have. So I think that's kind of where the cohort came together, is that we all have similarities and differences that we're able to work through with each other and say, oh, we tried this to be able to fix that problem. Oh, we've got this problem, so why don't you try this instead? And everybody was just, it was a lot of fun. It was fun being able to talk with everybody.
I thank you for asking me to be on this, because this was my first year being here in the fall, since the fall. So it was a big learning curve, but it was super helpful to see kind of what was going on at this level. So thank you. I really enjoyed one cohort where there was someone presenting to the group, and she had, was professionally consulting with another school district around research, and that was her work. And she said, big thing that stuck in my mind that we kept on coming back to when we were figuring this out and getting stuck is, she had said in her experience with the school, she realized like a couple years in that they were kind of asking the wrong questions, right? And so that stood out as something like, are we asking the right questions? Is that why we're stuck? So it was, the takeaway for me was always ask that question. Are we asking the right question? And flexibility. So.
I mean, sorry,
No.
but for me, I've obviously got a different perspective because I'm a student, and I just there was a lot happening behind the scenes that I know I personally wasn't aware of before. Little things from when we were making our Airtable, there were apps where I'm like, I've never heard of this app before, and then they would go, oh, every teacher uses this app every day, and I'm like, wait, how have I not heard of this? To the big things that are going on in the background of the big questions that are being asked is not as simple as it may look. But I also think working together, students and teachers working together, as well as our district working with other districts, we come up with great solutions together. Our Airtable, which we talked about, was more or less stolen from Chicopee, if we're being honest. We made it. We made it our own, but there was a lot of a lot of inspiration, which we took from Chicopee, but at the same time, Chicopee learned things from us and how we were going to take our approach to their Airtable, and they were able to develop on their end. And working together, we were able to come up with ideas for future plans, which may or may not actually happen, but if they could happen, would be very cool. That wouldn't have involved if we were working on our own. So I think that aspect of working with people who you don't ordinarily interact with and seeing completely different perspectives really push this project forward.
Yeah, and I agree with Jamie. I thought it was really neat how we all came in with kind of different concerns and different points of view, but they all kind of go together to help us toward this goal. So when some of our first meetings, we were all talking and it led into, a different question, which led into a different question. And we're all coming from a different place, but ultimately we have the same goal in mind. So it was just really fun working with this group. So thank you.
Thank you to all of you. I really appreciate it. It was a pleasure working with you. I'm going to do a quick lightning round through innovation pathways. So we had our computer science showcase today. Just want to update you on some really great news. So we received designation from the state. We were one of 30 districts to receive innovation pathway for our computer science program. That means that we are now eligible for additional revenue from this pathway. So we received an initial $25,000 for planning. We also received $25,000 from our Project Lead the Way grant that allowed us for training and other resources. And then with the designation came an additional $75,000 for this year and several years moving forward that will continue to fund this work. And we also now with a cybersecurity grant coming on board, we're eligible for funding through Lockheed Martin and Project Lead the Way to support that program as well. We had a fantastic industry professional luncheon. Mr. Porky was kind enough to join us today, where we had over 50 students from middle school all the way through up to high school showcase their project in our computer science courses, and then some of our clubs like Girls Who Code, the drone project that Mr. Brown's son was a part of, the automation and robotics class that Mrs. Kaler runs, all in preparation for the Applied Learning Showcase that's going to be taking place in Boston as part of the Mass STEM Hub. So as Dr. Cohen was talking about, deeper learning experiences that are authentic and relevant, these students will have the opportunity to again present their work to industry professionals from across the state to get feedback, but also to celebrate all that they've done. So a lot of work that's going on in the district that will continue on to next year and beyond, and you all are in good hands. So with that, I will end my presentation. Thank you very much for your time.
I just want to say that, Dave, it's been a pleasure working with you. And also, I always find that you're at there's some sort of innovation going on, you're always in there in the mix somewhere. And I'm sure you will be missed. And I know for the grant writing, it's just stunning how much revenue you pulled in just grants alone. Revenue generator.
Try to be a revenue generator.
I mean, it really is. It will be a loss, even if somebody has to get ramped back up to speed to your level. So I'm really grateful for your support. We've had some specific conversations in the past about how to change things. It's always been fantastic to work with. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.
Absolutely. No, this looks good, guys. Thanks for sharing. This Airtable, I just had to pull up my own corporate website is what it looks like. You guys are 1,000 times better.
Wow, all right.
I describe it like that, but seriously, this is really good. And your comment about plagiarism, it's the best type of flattery.
It's shared. They gave it to freely, and they took a lot from our evaluation tool, so they took our work and then used that to inform. So everyone learns from everybody.
Yeah.
Kind of like the code you were talking about earlier and sharing with them. So.
I was fortunate enough to join the luncheon today, and I think one of my biggest takeaways, I'd ask all of the groups, if you could do your project again, would you do anything differently? And they would all light up and explain how they would do it differently. And to me, that represents the purest form of learning and growth. It was fantastic. So thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
On to new business. Do we have Mr. Simon Harding in the room? There
There it is, behind the pole. Emerges.
Good evening, everyone.
Evening.
So we are looking at traveling as the music department next year. We do our biannual trips. And so this one coming up is more local, if you will. We try and take a bus to keep the costs down, and we're looking at doing Virginia, which is being resurrected from 2020. So we were supposed to do it, and then everything shut down. So instead of reinventing a whole new one, we're gonna try this one again. Fingers crossed nothing bad happens. If it does, I do apologize. If everything shuts down again, I take full responsibility. So this is one of our ones where we try and keep, like I said, the cost down, so we'll take a bus. We are looking at going the Thursday before April vacation, and then back on that Monday. You have, I believe, an updated itinerary. We had to adjust some dates and things like that to update it. So we're doing that. And we are trying to keep the cost. I looked back when we were doing it in 2020. We were charging about no more than $900. Obviously, with increases in everything, we are going to have to up that a little bit. But our goal is to keep it lower than the flying trips that we do, to give access to everybody. So I would say, not having worked with the vendors quite yet to get solid numbers, being so early on in this process, my goal is to keep it between 1,000 and 1,100. If I can get it down to 900, like it was in 2020, that is obviously the goal as well. We just don't know what the increases. I would guess from year to year when I travel, I try and increase it 10%. It seems to have been that 4 years. My gut is it's probably going to be closer to 15 to 18% of an increase. But fingers crossed, things will settle down by then. So as I work with vendors, I got a better idea, but that's just kind of our ballpark, just to keep it reasonable for families. The music department will do fundraising to allow students to offset the costs as much as possible, and those fundraising items generally are used during a trip here, so students will have access to that to help alleviate the cost as well. And music boosters will obviously be a part of that process as they go through. The goal of the trip is to, similar to what we do in the district, we try and give them authentic learning. And so we'll bring them, we'll participate in a festival, which they will get to witness schools from outside of Massachusetts, and participate in those festivals as well, get feedback from clinicians on what they're doing well and things that they can improve upon. And then throughout that process as well, because it's Virginia, do some sightseeing, do some historical sites and things like that. And it'll be a whirlwind because we'll travel on Thursday and we'll be back Monday. So it'll be a quick trip. Questions?
How many kids?
So the goal would be, we'd like to shoot for about 100. Numbers are a little bit low off of COVID. So 100 allows us to fill up the 2 buses, which keeps the cost where it needs to be. So that's going to be our ultimate goal, so we'll keep pushing for that.
Any other questions? I think we need a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the trip to Virginia, 2024.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous? Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'll let you know how New York goes, because we're going on Friday. So the weather looks good. As long as Sam doesn't lose any kids, we'll be good to go.
Safe travels.
Appreciate it.
We got one more field trip approval. Back again.
I'm back. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Courtney Legia. I teach NITMA and math department. See a couple of friendly parent faces. I have kids this year. So for those of you who don't know, we've had a long-standing partnership with a company called World Challenge for I don't even know, 15, 18 years, something like that. Where every other year we had taken an international trip abroad for at least 2 weeks. Some trips have been 4 weeks long. But these trips have been focused on hiking, community service, wilderness education, leadership education. So just like Simon, we had a trip that was scheduled to launch the year of 2020, and that was supposed to be to Thailand. And of course, that got postponed, but all the kids who had signed up for that trip ended up being like freshmen and sophomores. So it was postponed until 2021, but then the vaccine wasn't out yet when they were buying flights, so it was postponed till this past summer. So this past summer, we traveled with World Challenge. It was like our 8th trip with World Challenge. We went to Cambodia. It was changed to a different country because of the just travel restrictions due to COVID. So we had an awesome time, but other countries were still at the time a little more strict and stringent with their COVID requirements, very different than here. So 4 of my students ended up getting COVID. Ironically, they all shared the same tent when they were camping, and they had to quarantine anywhere from like 4 days to 7 days during that time in a hotel, like while we were all in Asia. And so did I. So it wasn't the ideal experience, but it was all prepaid for before COVID. So we like went through with the plan, we bought travel insurance, and that's just kind of the way it shook out. We still had an awesome time, but World Challenge has experienced they've closed all of their US offices because of the lack of revenue, because trips weren't launching anymore because of COVID. They're actually a UK-based company, and they had several offices throughout the US. Those are all closed now. And the customer service experience that we were receiving once we were home from Cambodia and trying to get insurance claims filed for extra charges, like in terms of like these COVID quarantine stays. It wasn't the customer service that I had been used to in the last 8 years that I've done it, which happens. So I said to John and Marianne that I wanted to evaluate new but similar partnerships that would offer the same type of deal. And maybe World Challenge will bounce back from this in the future and I could repartner with them. But as of right now, I'd like to pursue other avenues. So the company that I've been researching and communicating with and talking to other schools that use this company is called ARC, and they are based out of Oregon. So they're actually a US-based company, and they do this same exact type of experience. Like when I said I was partnered with World Challenge for many years, they knew exactly what I was talking about. So in describing the trip experience, for those of you who don't know, it's like when we leave for the trip, the students are given like $9,000 in cash. And it's like, okay, you guys have to hold on to this money. When we get into the country, you have to exchange this money. You're responsible for buying groceries. And they get this like budget sheet and itinerary for how they are expected to spend that money over the course of the 2 weeks that we're traveling. So it's a lot on the students. So it really ties into our portrait of a learner competencies in a really hard way, and developing those skills of being a solution seeker, being an effective communicator, being a global citizen. So this company does all the same things. So the trip would be 2 weeks. I'm going to California this time so that nobody has to spend a week in a hotel, just to play it safe. We're going to try a domestic trip. I also like the idea of trying a domestic trip with a brand new provider to get to see how all of their operations run. But I have been in touch with clients who use them as well, who have also used World Challenge and have had a similar experience as I did. And they say that this company is top notch. Their safety protocols are excellent. They provide you with like the safety risk assessments before you do any of the hiking, any of the community service projects, and they're very flexible. Like they had a school that was supposed to travel to Peru this year, much like we were, and they had to be rerouted because Peru has its own civil unrest happening at the moment, and they got them a new itinerary that was comparable, same price, and the kids had a great time. So, people are saying that super flexible, very professional, very safe, and they had great things to say about them. And I talked to like 3 different people who use this company around the US. So the proposal is for 12 days, but I do it every 2 years because the trip is more expensive than normal. So I like to give like a longer period of time to keep the payments reasonable. And it would be about $4,000, which is always what we've kind of kept our World Challenge trips around. That sounds a lot when you're thinking about, we live in a tent for most of the time, but the primary cost actually comes from all their safety procedures that they have in place. Like when we're out hiking in Yosemite National Park, we have satellite phones, like in case we're in an area that has no reception. You know, we're camping somewhere, like they have 24-hour emergency service hotlines where we can just call the hotline and say, we have a kid right now having an allergic reaction in the middle of the woods. Like, so a lot of the cost is actually their 24-hour emergency response team care and being able to provide that and be flexible for safety reasons. So our trips are like, you know, we're arriving in San Francisco. We would do a community service project with the houseless population in San Francisco that would be partnered through either a local church or a local foundation that has been doing this work for decades in San Francisco. The students would go through like safety training, what to expect when dealing with this type of population, what your interactions will look like. It would be monitored by adults at all times. But the students would be encouraged to like have conversations in a safe space and discuss with these people like, you know, what kind of services are provided to you, which ones do you choose to take advantage of, which ones don't choose. So an educational experience in addition to just serving meals or providing that community service. From there, we would actually go to Yosemite National Park and they would experience wilderness education, and then the soft skills of leadership, leaving no trace while you're hiking, being able to work with others and take on different roles. We usually have the students like, they each go through a rotation of roles every day. Like someone's the cooking team for the day. Someone's the leader who's calling ahead and making sure our transportation is gonna arrive on time. These are all things that they coordinate, and I'm definitely more of like the guide on the side for these types of trips. After our hiking and wilderness education in Yosemite National Park, we would actually go up to Lake Tahoe, which is an alpine lake. I don't know, you know, I've never been, I'm super excited about the potential of going, but very different lakes than around here. You can see crystal clear water straight to the bottom, not the murkiness that we're used to. We would do some trail maintenance community service at Lake Tahoe, and then they would get to stand up paddleboard on Lake Tahoe and really experience the looking down and seeing through the lake waters. From there, we'd go back to San Francisco, and you can't be in California without trying surfing for the first time. So we'd go through a beginner surfing lesson at the ocean, and then we do like some big feast at a restaurant to like celebrate. We camped for 10 days and did a bunch of community service and had an awesome time. And, you know, we go out with this like, you know, big dinner before we come back home. So that's the itinerary. Like I said, it's gonna be ballpark $4,000. And because it's a hiking trip and we're like, it's impossible for us to like safely hike with a very large group, because then you're like back to back to back for 20 people long and it just doesn't work out. So the company caps the teams at 12 students and 2 teachers, and then we have a guide from the company as well. And we travel by 15 passenger vans. So at most they have the resources to accept 2 teams from Nipmuc at once. So our trip really has like maybe a limit of 24 students could sign up for it, and we would need a minimum of 8 to run it at all. Tracking the past trips, we had 9 students signed up to go to Asia when we went this past summer. The trip before that in 2018 was Iceland. We had 22 kids sign up to go to Iceland, so we did 2 teams that year. The 2 years prior to that, in 2016, we did Belize, and that was 14 kids signed up. So what they're saying they have availability for tracks with what we normally get for this type of trip, because it's kind of special interest. I'm hoping that running it domestically might make people maybe more apt who are a little timid about international travel to try something that's a little out of their wheelhouse or within their wheelhouse. So those are the details of the trip. I'm happy to answer any additional questions as well. If you have any. Yeah, I'm like math teacher. I'm like, what are they gonna ask?
I think you get a lot of detail. It's great.
Yeah.
Are they climbing El Cap? No.
Just mostly out of curiosity, when you were doing international, did you also facilitate passport stuff for the kids, or were they all responsible?
So the company does that. Like the company says like, okay, like you do need to get a passport. We want to see it, like a photocopy of it mailed to us by this time. It can't expire within 6 months of your travel date. So we did have to facilitate all that stuff for sure. And then when we go on a trip like this, we actually do like a build-up day prior to us flying out, where we'll have all the kids come with all of their equipment, and they get a lot of equipment from the company. Like they don't have to buy tents, but they need a hiking backpack, things like that. So we provide them with a kit list of equipment they'll need to borrow from friends or purchase if they can't borrow, to be prepared for themselves, and then they get equipment as well from the company. And so we do a build-up day before we go where we're like, okay, bring everything packed exactly as you think you're bringing it on the plane tomorrow. And they show up and it's like full-size bottles of shampoo, and I'm like, you're carrying this on your back for 12 weeks. Like, this has gotta go. We need like a little travel size, you know. We give them recommendations for stuff that's like environmentally friendly too, because we're on a campground. So depending on where we're showering, depends on, you know, we could be close to a water source. So we encourage biodegradable concentrated soap. So you're only carrying a vial this big that lasts you for 2 weeks. And so we give them that 24-hour grace. We're like, okay, we need to change these items or else you're gonna have a backache by the time, by the time you come home. So we do like definitely have our hands on in terms of them leaving here prepared. In terms of fundraising, because the trip is student focused in terms of leadership and skill building, I am willing and ready to like help them with any fundraiser that they want to research, set up, and get on board. So I facilitate with the money aspect, with any approvals that we need and things like that. But like one year, when we were getting ready to go to Belize, the kids were like, you know what's terrible? When you're watching games at the soccer field and the sun is just in your eyes, we're like, I bet we could make a ton of money just selling sunglasses. And like, they wanted to do it and it was their idea, so we made it happen. And I facilitate those things like that. So there are fundraising opportunities if they want to put in the legwork and come up as a team with a plan, and then we make it happen. But it's all student focused, so it kind of depends on the leadership and level of motivation of the kids to like want to do those types of things. But we meet like once a month leading up to the trip. When we travel internationally, it would always be about like maybe cultural things related, like what kind of currency, what kind of language, like what's considered polite, things like that. We're obviously not going to need that same type of education going to California. But in terms of working with the houseless population or understanding what kind of trail maintenance, we do meet once a month as a team leading up to it just to talk about like what to expect, because it's not your traditional, we're going to Europe and staying in a hotel and going on a guided tour. It's not that type of experience. So we make sure that when they leave, they know what to expect and we're prepared to like enact a plan.
I don't know, the culture's kind of different out there in California.
Yeah, I know, it could feel like a different country, right? We might feel like we have all the time in the world in California. That's what I hear it's like. Instead of here where, you're used to darkness in the morning when you go to work and darkness when you come home at night. Is that just us? I don't know.
All right. Any other questions? If not, we'll take a motion to approve the trip in 2025.
We approve the California field trip.
Second.
All fair?
Aye.
Yes. Thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you
in.
guys, we appreciate your support.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right. New business. I guess we're done with business.
I have the district
There we go.
review. Unless you want to
Not
skip
quite done
over
with new
to
business.
and I have no idea why I put that after her. And now let's talk about our comprehensive accountability review. I'll try to make it as jazzy as I can.
You got a tough act to follow.
I know, right?
It's a kindness, is that what you're saying?
Wait for it to come up. Thank you. So when I received the draft plan, I sent that to you a while back. We gave them a little bit of feedback. And so what I just shared with you is the full final report. And I know it says November 2022. That's not an error for anyone watching at home. I do know that it is not November or 2022, but this is actually many months later is when they finalized the report, which we knew would happen. We had, as a reminder, with the district review, they do them, I think, about every 10 years or so. And it's all districts have this review done. We requested to have it at the beginning of the school year so we'd be able to have some of the data to maybe help with our strategic planning. So I did in the last meeting incorporate in some of the initiatives for us to look at, for those of us who worked on it with all the list of initiatives, some of the recommendations here were thrown in there as well. So what I'm going to do, you have the 100-page document, just for anyone watching at home. I didn't actually double check yet on the DESE website to see if it's public yet, but pretty soon they said it would be up on that site. So anyone who is so inclined to read the whole review and document, it will be up there and it's public. So what I'm going to do is just give some highlights and just a little bit of an overview, so you kind of know what happened, just to remind everyone. And so they actually partnered with American Institute of Research, the AIR, to conduct that, who came and did the review, and then they bring all the data together, they send it to DESE, and DESE puts the report together. And they are really focused on understanding how district system structures and practices function to support districts' continuous improvement efforts. And it's all structured around the 6 standards that I have listed there, which I'm going to go through and give just highlights of the strengths and some of the recommendations. But leadership and governance, curriculum and instruction, assessment, human resources and PD, student support, and financial and asset management. On the next slide, so this is part of Mass General laws in order for them to strengthen the cycle of continuous improvement. And one thing I wanted to note is it's about, I compare it to, not that it's exactly the same, but if anyone's ever heard of the NEASC accountability reviews that we have about every 10 years at the high school level. And so part of that, you do document review. That's a lot more of a self-study. We didn't have so much of a self-study. We just had to give them all those documents. And but there are some similarities to the process of the fact that there are standards that NEASC identifies. These are standards that DESE identifies. And then really all it is about saying, hey, this is what you're doing well, and here are areas that you can consider in your improvement efforts. And what is helpful for them at DESE is that it helps them to identify resources because they're picking a certain number of districts every year. And if you recall, when I talked about this back in October and November, when we found out about the details of the review, we noted, someone said, well, why did we get picked? And it's a whole, if we aren't in the cycle for the other comprehensive reviews, if we're not in a Title I federal review, if we're not, haven't been chosen, they do some urban, some suburban, some rural, it just, we end up in the mix eventually, and we did this past year. So every year, there are various audits from the state that we go through, and you hear, presentations on that. So this is a different form of that. So if you go to the next slide, please. So the site visit was on November 14th. The visit included 17.5 hours of interviews and focus groups, and they met with about 80 stakeholders. So you have the whole list of stakeholders. I'm sure some of you were involved in that. I can't remember which groups were involved, but I know that they definitely got a good sense from the whole district. They also had 4 teacher focus groups with 5 elementary school teachers, 6 middle school teachers, 9 high school teachers, and they conducted 62 observations of classroom instruction across the 4 schools. So that was in the site visit. In addition to that, this is what I keep referring to as the 100+ documents that we provided them. So that was predominantly, it felt like Cheryl and I, but I know other people helped, so thank you to the whole team. But in the end, we were pulling every document to make sure, as you know, I like to provide lots of information, so I want to make sure they had everything that we did in the various areas. So this is the list that they shared. This is pulled all right out of the report that I shared with you. But they looked at our performance data, achievement, growth, enrollment, graduation, dropout, retention. A lot of that is what we have to report to DESE. That's on our school profile every year. They also looked at our district staffing and finances, all of our curriculum review process and timelines and templates. There are a lot of mandates of what we're supposed to do in those processes, and we've developed them over the years and used those. Any past educational reports that DESE has done of our district, they reviewed as well. And they also looked at a lot of things that you hear about throughout the year, which is, a lot comes from state mandates and regulations, but you have the district and school improvement plans, school committee policies they looked at, any of our curriculum documents, job descriptions, collective bargaining, evaluation tools, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see the whole list there. But we provided all of that to them, and they were very impressed by our document review and what we provided. So they thanked us for that. So what I'm going to do now, I pulled up every one of the standards. I just pulled up the graph, and what I want to do is just give kind of highlights of the sections. I did do kind of screenshots of these, so hopefully you'll be able to see it. I did put it into your background notes. I did that today, so if you didn't see it yesterday, I finished up a couple aspects of it today for you, but I'd like to kind of go through. I do not yet have all of this analyzed and memorized, I will say, so I've read through it a number of times, but some of the next steps will be that analysis to really, understand some of the points or comments that they're making. But I'll do my best to try to clarify what I recall that they spoke about. So the first area was related to leadership and governance. So the governance, that's you, just so you know, that's the school committee governance. So they really highlighted the fact that we have really strong communication systems between the committee and staff and students and community members. And they reference a lot of the community. So I shared background memos and some of our leadership team, memos and agendas. I did a whole year of our agendas, so they had a sense of what we were doing in our meetings. So I shared that kind of information with them. They identified that there is a strong communication between the school committee and the superintendent, and that also came from a lot of the conversations that you shared and other people shared as well. Areas for growth were increased opportunities for teacher involvement with the school committee. So I definitely recommend go into that section so it clarifies, because I said, okay, what does that mean? And there was a sense of not having some teachers in the focus groups. I got the sense from how I was reading it, didn't feel like they had a lot of conversations and interactions with school committee members. So we have people come and present and we ask questions. So that it's something I hadn't heard before. So I would say most of the recommendations that I'll go through, almost all of them, I'm like, oh yeah, like I totally have heard that, or I remember saying it. I'm one of the people lots of people have shared info. This was kind of new. So I think, when we get into the analysis piece, which will be heading into, this summer and into next year, and kind of picking apart what are some areas for growth, we can think about, what are ways that we can facilitate more conversations too. So that's what that was about.
So facilitate more conversations
With teachers, so,
when
for
they're
school committee.
when they're in front of us?
Yeah, or it could be, maybe there are other ways to engage and get input from teachers. Informally.
So you're saying when my
Guys, you're
wife
telling me to
hosts
shut up.
the holiday party at our house, I shouldn't go hide in the basement?
That's when you engage, yes, yeah, exactly, see? We already are coming up with good ideas, I like that. Yeah, so I think, so that's good. I think sometimes though, if you think about it, you're like an entity sometimes, and if you don't have those interactions, so you do at the building level, if you have students at certain building levels, but we only get a few. I can't bring everyone here to the meetings, right? Although that would be lovely, but so you might not have interactions, and so how do we communicate more across? So I'll get some input from the association too. What they were thinking.
That's really important, because it's important for people to see that we are actually engaged with the teachers.
Yeah.
I know that having students I'm interacting with a lot of teachers, but people who are out in the community want to know how we're utilizing our resources. They want to see that we're interacting. So I understand.
Yeah. So I'm going to keep going. So district and school leadership. So the district leadership team, which we always reference, the DLT, which includes school leaders, is effective, efficient, includes functional communication systems that align to the district action plan. So that, and leading into the next one, they talked a lot about our tracking of our district and school improvement plans and our tracking of our goals at our meetings. The area for growth, delineation and clarification of roles and responsibilities of central office administration to ensure all pertinent areas are addressed consistently. It makes you like, what does that mean? So you go into there deeper, and I definitely recommend reading that section as well. But I'll try to describe it this way. We are a lean, mean machine of district leadership, but it came up from staff across the board that we are a very, very small team in relationship to other school districts. And what does that mean? Because we are a very talented, hardworking team, we get the work done, but what happens is there isn't sometimes clear delineation because we wear 20,000 hats. All of us. So, you have someone, normally you would have someone in charge of all of these things and someone in charge of all of these other aspects, but they're mixed in. And so we need to continuously clarify who's in charge of what, but it came up the fact that it can be tricky at times and bare bones with one of the quotes. I don't know who said it because they don't tell you who says anything, but so you'll read that section, but it's definitely coming up a lot right now from staff.
So okay, I don't want to discuss this, but there are different solutions to that problem other than what they're recommending. So there's, in a business context, there's many books that have been put out that say you have to manage with fewer and fewer people all the time. So what you have to do is come up with a checklist-based system that allows you to achieve all those tasks without losing any component of the task. So I would kind of disagree with the idea that you need to staff up to cover every responsibility. Now, that being said, yeah, we're running on a skeleton. That's part of, that's exactly right.
So, and not to suggest that we're gonna put in 10 requests for administrators, but to emphasize the fact that it was showing up across, not just coming from us in the central office sharing that, it's something that staff indicated and other people indicated that they can see the impact of the fact that we don't have particularly the middle level leadership support. So, and that most districts have.
That's
curriculum
reflected
instructional. So we talked about that already, about how we try to look at different, stipend and structures or other ways that we can get support and coaching. But other districts may have, let's say, a coach like at every building. We have one coach in the whole district working in some. That's just one example. So it was interesting for me to see that. And then when I first read, I'm like, we don't need clarification rules, but when you go in there, you can see the comments that people made. And so we'll continue to work on that.
That's reflected in the expenditures compared to other districts in the state that are comparable to us. Our expenditures for administration are incredibly low. I want to say that very emphatically, and we get experienced people and we pay them nicely to make sure that the administration expense is low. So I just want to emphasize that one more time.
Okay. All right, we're only on the second one, so I'm gonna keep. That's all right.
I'm twitching.
It's all right. It's all good. It's all good. All right. So district school improvement planning. We talked about that a lot. We know that school councils, and I know some of you have been involved in school councils, are engaged in development review of school improvement plans. They were able to see that that was taking place, and that it's thoughtful, grounded in data, and represents input from multiple stakeholders. So that was great to hear. I knew that, but it's nice to have them say, hey, you're doing a lot of these things well as well. So budget development, the resources are equitably distributed to schools and programs to ensure improved performance, opportunities, outcomes. They talked about the transparency that we have from their perspective in our budget and website and presentations that we give in, that it's site-based, that we look at where resources and prioritize where they need to go. So that was some of the language they referenced. That was the second one. Okay, so the transparent process and review programs, initiatives, activities with student data. I'm going to keep going, but stop me if you want to at any point. So the next one is curriculum and instruction standard. So a lot of strengths showing up here. So curriculum selection and use. In the past, we talked, and I've shared in my own presentations to you in the past around our curriculum review process. It's well documented and structured. So we have regular reviews of content areas and as well as other opportunities for reviews if something else comes up. We have concrete strategies to ensure alignment across elementary school curriculum that they noted, and we use the Atlas software for documentation of curriculum that we've had for probably about 10 years now, I think, as well. So that we've come a long way with that. Around instruction, we prioritize deep and authentic learning environments, including project-based learning for middle school and high school staff. It was really nice when I looked at the comments and what people said, that they said multiple people brought up the fact that we're focused on PBL and deeper learning and authentic experiences. You even heard it in presentations tonight. So it is what we talk about, we live it, and we're working towards improving it. And also a lot of people talked about the district curriculum combination plan, the DCAP, and we had rolled that out right at the beginning of the school year. So it would be front of mind for everyone at that point. Some of the areas for growth: to review the implementation and effectiveness of instructional strategies used for students with disabilities, including co-teaching. We talked about, for some of our feedback that we gave, we were in year one of training around co-teaching and inclusion. So I'm not surprised, because that's what we identified as an area based off of data and observations that came out of my entry plan from last year, that this is an area for growth. But also, I think they saw some of it in the observational reports as well, that's an area for improvement. And increased district level support for instructional coaching to support high quality instruction along a continuum of student need. We talked about it, so I wasn't surprised to see that show up as an area for growth from them as well. Student access to coursework. So they really were impressed with our partnership with Mass Insight. If you're not familiar with that, or if that's new for you, that's about increasing equitable access to advanced coursework, in particular AP courses. When we talk about more than 50% of our upperclassmen are involved in AP courses, it's because of our work with opening up and removing barriers, and because of all the training that we've had. That's why when we look at our AP scores this past year in the region, we're top in the region. When you look comparatively, because that's a lot of training and work that we do in those partnerships. And even though it's an investment, it's definitely been well worth the investment. So they noted that. And at the elementary and middle school levels, the district emphasizes rigor through differentiation rather than course leveling or alternate coursework. So I don't remember the specifics of what they said about that. I'd have to go back into there to see that. Anyone have any questions on this standard? No? All right, keep going. So what they did, and they gave a lot of data around classroom observation. So what I did is pull the categories that they looked at. So you would see the categories they were looking for, and then this is their high level ratings that they gave. If you want to see, specifically what they found in those observations, which I just want to know is like November 14th. I don't know where that fell in our November days. I can't remember. I'd have to look it up with parent-teacher conferences and half days, but it wasn't a great time. No excuses, but just saying it was like not the ideal week, but we did it. And what they did is they gave kind of feedback, and we asked them for, okay, can you give us the rubrics so we can really dive into this more? Didn't really get a ton of details, so we'll just do our best. One thing we did do when I received some of this initial report earlier this year, in one of our learning walks with the leadership team, we pulled areas that we thought we weren't doing as well based on the data, and then we looked for that when we went into the classroom just to kind of practice what we imagined they were doing, and just to have conversations around that. So we're going to continue to do things like that when we do our walkthroughs. So the first category they were looking for, they identified as emotional support. It describes the social emotional functioning of the classroom, including teacher-student relationships and responsiveness to social emotional needs. So in the observations that they had across the two schools by the 4 schools by these 2 observers, it was an upper middle range for K-5 band, in the middle range for 6 to 8, and for 9 to 12 bands, it was middle range as well, but 4.6 and 4.7 respectively. They gave this as a strength later on, and I think it's one of the strengths that they list, that it was clear that we had a focus on social emotional well-being in our district. A classroom organization describes the management of students' behavior, time, and attention. And when you think of where it says behavior and then time and attention, I think those were the subcategories. If I go back and check, ratings were in the high range for all grade bands. I'm not surprised by that as well. When we go into all of our classrooms, they're on task, they're doing work, they're engaged in what they're asked to do. And our students are great. The students are great everywhere, but I do love them here. Instructional support describes efforts to support cognitive and language development, including cognitive demand of the assigned tasks, the focus on higher order thinking skills, and the use of process-oriented feedback. Ratings were in the lower middle range for all grade bands. So that's an area for growth. Now, if you think of, I'm again not surprised in the sense of if you think of what we're focusing on, we're focusing right now on the instructional practices of tier 1. We've said that, and increasing the rigor in the sense of our deeper learning authentic experiences as well. And that we are targeting this tier 1 across the board in multiple ways. We will continue to do so. And so that's an area for growth, particularly I would say after the pandemic, we've seen a shift and we're still working on it to get everyone to grade appropriate level across the board. Student engagement, and so they had a subsection for student engagement under the instructional support. So for grades 4 and up, they noted where student engagement was measured as an independent domain, ratings were in the upper middle range for grades 4 to 5, and grades 6 to 8, and in the middle range for 9 to 12. That is in line with, I'm not happy because I want us to get an A in everything, but it's not surprising as your students go up in grade levels. We know that's a national trend of engagement tends to increase, which is why much of our focus is on making that authentic, relevant, meaningful connections with the real world and what happens after we leave our school system. So that's why we're focused on that, to increase that engagement all that time. And dipping into their passions and interests with the interest inventories and career pathways as well. Questions on this? So if you're looking for like the details, there's a section on that. I'm just giving you.
Yeah, so I found the section. So the scale is 1 to 7.
Yep.
And 1 and 2 are the low range, 3,
Yep.
4, 5 is middle, and 6 and 7 is the high range. And it has some criteria for each range. It's on page 16.
So it's helpful. It's also a snapshot, of a day. But the same thing with NEASC, we could go in, and when I would do it, when I used to do NEASC teams, and you would go in classrooms, and when you have, that's a little different. They only have 2 people going, but we would have a team of 10 people, and we hit all of the classrooms multiple times and look at student work, and we're able to come to determinations based off of standards on rigor and various instructional items that we see in the classroom. So it's similar. They have standards, and that's what they're looking for. All right. So assessment standard. Next one. So the key strengths. So data and assessment systems. They were impressed by our multiple sources of data, which made me happy to hear, because we've been working really hard to have multiple sources of data. If they would have come 5 years ago, they might not have said that, right? So our work is showing up. That was great to have a comprehensive picture of student, school, and district performance. And they also said there's a strong alignment between our data systems and curriculum. In regard to data use, the district and school leaders review student performance data. They were able to see that to identify goals for closing achievement, access, and opportunity gaps. Their areas for growth they identified as develop and implementation of clear processes for using data at all school levels. I hope that's not shocking for you to hear that as an area for growth, because that is what Cheryl's been leading and working on with data inquiry and all of that work all year long. We had already identified that as an area for growth that we still are continuing to work on, and will continue next year as well. But we made a lot of progress over the course of the year. Sharing results. They found that in some places there was inconsistency in sharing of results. So in some areas they noted, if you go into, I wanted to see like what they said, so I looked in this section, and some areas they said, yeah, in this area they share this data. In other, they share it here, but parents said they didn't get it here. So it was a mixture, and we know that that's also an area for growth that's come up. It's in our strategic planning, and we know we're working towards increasing that on a consistent level across the district in multiple ways. So I wasn't surprised to hear that, and it's already on the radar for us, and working to improve this year and heading into next year as well to continue. Human resources and PD standard. Before I move on, pausing, are we good? Okay, all right. I know I'm talking a lot here. All right, so we have infrastructure. There is improved infrastructure for hiring and payroll through central office staffing and technology. Hopefully you know that, because we've tried to highlight that, or I've tried to highlight that over the last 2 years. Since Lori Petty has come in, we've identified areas for growth, and we're putting in systems and kind of modernizing our human resource and payroll. Recruitment, hiring, and assignment. There's consistent, equitable hiring processes that include multiple stakeholders that exist. So I was proud of that work, because I put a lot of work into that myself, and working with the team. We developed a hiring protocol and did a lot of training last year, and that can carry over this year So that showed up. We need increased support for the recruitment, hiring, and retention of diverse educators. We identified that that's an area that we know for growth. It's still in our strategic initiatives. It's one of the initiatives that's showing up, and we know that's an area for growth for us. Supervision, evaluation, and educator development. The district provides professional development opportunities that include teacher-led, job-embedded, content-based, and individually pursued learning and structures for collaboration. That's a lot, because we do a lot. There are lots of opportunities for our teachers to be involved in PD in multiple ways, thanks to Cheryl's leadership along with the PD committee. There's consistent documentation of multiple sources of evidence to support progress towards evaluation goals across educators is occurring. That's really nice to hear that we have that consistent documentation, and we're really goal-oriented and focused on that growth, and they were able to see it. They looked at a lot of samplings of evaluations, so that's a strength. Comprehensive induction programming, including mentorship, takes place. We're one of the few districts that have a 3-year induction program, so we have a really strong program there, as you know. Areas for growth, providing all educators with specific actionable feedback on each standard and areas for improvement. I haven't gone into this section to read, but I'm assuming this is coming from their looking at the evaluations. That they did a snapshot of various evaluations, and they found that we may have had evidence, but we might not be giving actionable feedback on all of the standards. And so that's something that we can look into and take a look at as well. Recognition, leadership, development, advancement. There are differentiated roles and opportunities for growth, including distributed leadership opportunities to build leadership skills, retain and maximize the impact of effective professional staff. I can't recall what they mentioned in that, but I do think we try as much as we can to build in teacher leadership. It's a focus of our work here as much as we can without having additional administrative roles or in there, but opportunities for teachers to engage in the work and leadership. Student support. So the first indicator, safe and supportive school climate and culture, says we prioritize student support, well-being, belongingness as critical to academic success. I was happy to hear that. That has been our focus, so I'm glad they saw that. District-wide instructional observation report scores for the emotional support domain are high, so they were able to see it showing up in the classroom, so our work is having impact in the classroom from their perspective. Increased structure around social, emotional, behavioral supports in the elementary and middle schools to support sustainability. Those are some aspects we continue to talk about. The need for therapeutic programming, the need for ongoing training. We've added in additional behavioral supports. We still have students who have additional needs, and it's front and center, particularly at the elementary level. So I wasn't surprised for that. That's something we're still working on. Tiered systems of support. A committee of school-based educators led the DCAP revision. District emphasis on providing PD ensures that all educators are familiar with the revised DCAP and strategies and accommodations included. I think if they would have come back later on in the year, they would have said a lot more about our tiered systems of support because it's been such a focus for us this year. But this was in November, and we were really heavily focused on DCAP rollout at the time. And then family, student, and community engagement partnerships. The SMORE app allows for translation, so we have already talked about that. That was something that we brought in last year. And there's still increased support for families of L students to access, engage in parent-teacher conferences. I would say our teachers, there's always room for improvement. Particularly our L teachers did an exceptional job. I mean, we had so many interpreters, translators, they, access like a whole system when parents would come to help them out. And I've never seen it to the degree that I did this year, but we have multiple cultural night coming up. I'm like, how many countries are we represented? It's a lot of countries. We have a lot of languages. And so, we still need to keep helping to make sure we're engaging all of our families, and it's just constant work, but we're making progress and feeling good about that. Our team's been great. Next one, financial and asset management. So budget documentation reporting. Our budget documents are clear, accurate, user-friendly, provide historical spending data for comparisons and sufficient detail for stakeholders to understand resource allocations. Adequate budget, they use available funding effectively to support student performance opportunities and outcomes, and the community provides sufficient general appropriation funds each year to meet required net school spending. Areas for growth, development of a plan to address potential future finance limitations. We talked to them a lot about that, and that is, you'll see that showing up in our strategic plan as well. Financial tracking, forecasting, controls, and audits. They said we provide regular, accurate reports to the superintendent and the school committee on spending from all funding sources and forecast spending through the end of the year with adequate school level information provided to every principal. And the district competitively procures independent financial auditing services annually, implements audit recommendations, and complies with other regulations as applicable. So that was all good to hear. Capital planning, facility maintenance, no surprise here. We put it front and center when we spoke to them, and it didn't just come from me. I think everyone talked about it. So we know we need to develop the long-term plan. We have future capital development improvement needs and adequate size facilities based on enrollment projections that we know are coming in the future. So that came from that.
So I just wanted to mention something I just read briefly.
Sure.
That the budget process, and referring to the budget process and all the materials you guys have created, said this clear and transparent process is a strength of the district. So congratulations on that.
Yeah.
That's a tribute to the improvements you guys made.
Yeah.
It's really nice job.
We always know we can get better at it, but I do feel that it's presented now in such a way that people can at least grasp some of it, you know? I mean, it's complex, right? It's really
Chapter
complex.
70 stuff
When you
is
get into
still,
the
I was talking
details,
to Jay,
but
chapter 70 stuff, we need maybe a little tweak on that a little bit.
But, keep working on it. So if we go to the last slide, just next steps. So what we'll do, I mean, I think we got this final document maybe about a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, the last couple of weeks. So we haven't done a district leadership team analysis of this whole document. We won't be doing that in the next couple of weeks, just so you're aware, but that will be something that we'll bring into leadership retreats in the summer and into next year. And we're pulling the initiative recommendations into strategic planning just to make sure we're hitting those points if it's relevant to strategic plan. Some things are just, you know, what we're going to be working on. And then school leadership and council analysis, if there's something specific for data for schools, they can bring that and take a look, and maybe that can drive some of the school improvement plans that they work on. And then anything we can, we'll incorporate into the next strategic plan. But most are already in the list, I would say. So I don't know if you have any questions or comments on it. Definitely, I really take some time to read it, because I can't capture in a brief, I don't know how brief that was, but in a brief or not so brief presentation, I can't capture all of the amazing things that they just shared about what we're doing well in the district. It is, you never know, right? I mean, I know we do a good job, but when you have people come in, look through everything, they compare to standards and look at, this is their job, they go into other districts. We have really an outstanding report, and I've looked at other schools' reports, and we came out looking really good, and that was great, and that's a testament to all the work of all of you here, but in governance, but also everyone in the schools and the leaders and the hard work that they put into it. So,
do we have someone we can contact to get clarity on any comments in the document if we need them?
Yeah, I have a contact. I don't know if I think she kind of put it together. She's the person who wrote it, because when I gave feedback, she was the person. And I said, oh, this isn't, you said this is not accurate. We couldn't change any of the info, not that I tried, but.
Well, there's one thing in here, like I was reading a rating of, it was confusing. They said we had a rating of 48, which is in the upper range, but then they went on to say that the state had an average of 52. Okay. I didn't understand what that, I think the numbers might be wrong, actually.
Yeah, so if you have a specific, you can let me know. And I can
school climate section.
Yeah, that was the climate section. Didn't make any sense to me.
Okay.
I thought it was really nice to see that in the areas of growth, just again, and I just kind of skimmed through it, the areas of growth, none of them were a surprise. There are things that we've all
I was
talked
happy with
about.
that, because I didn't know what they would come up with, but I would say, and I told them it was a very accurate representation from what I can see of what's happening in the district. So that felt good. It felt valid.
Well, and it matches some of the decisions we just made with some of the budget
Right.
allocations and things, as you say, that have gone through the strategic plan. So in a lot of ways, it feels like it's an affirmation of what we've been
Yes,
doing and the community's been doing.
you're
so
absolutely
far
right.
this year.
This whole section on adequate budget, financial
Yeah.
tracking is wonderful. Whoever wrote that encapsulated it perfectly. You know, the stress that we have on getting enough budget, what the problems are with the state, preserving funds, things like that. It's very, very good. Wish we could publish that as a flyer. Yeah, we can, we can.
Put it out as a backdrop behind us.
It is public, but not a lot of people go and look for it, you know. It's there. Okay. Well, thank you.
Well, thank you. I mean, this is kudos to you and the team, right? Because this is a real reflection on all the hard work. And so thank you guys very much. And I think you made a good call in the beginning for the timing, because it's kind of darn near perfect, right? As we finish up the 5-year strategic plan, as we think about different levels of goals going into next year, this kind of gives us a head start with all that. Great, thank you. All right. Now we're done with new business. All right. So school committee subcommittees. I guess a quick call out. The deadline for the Golden Apple submissions is this Friday. So it sounds like you're going to send out another reminder this week, and then you've got to pick the date. Is that it to review these?
I gave you when I had times available.
Okay.
So if you can majority pick one of those times, that will ensure that we'll be able to do it. And we also need to be able to communicate, you know, in advance so they're able to come at the next meeting. We don't want them to have to come after school.
Next year. All right.
Or next
So
year.
we want to have a quick discussion on any of those dates, or do it by email later? I'm in Las Vegas for all three, so. I'll just lay that right out there.
Aruba?
Yeah, seriously. But I'd actually rather be here doing this. For real.
Some good points on your face, though.
Yeah.
I can do the Monday or either of the Tuesdays.
Is there more than one Tuesday?
Yeah, there's a 4 p.m. and a 7:30 p.m.
Oh.
I can only do Monday. I have team hall. Tuesday, Wednesday.
Monday's always a winner for me.
So what time is that?
It's at 7:30.
Okay, I can suck it up and do Monday. Monday the 22nd.
It is.
All right, so that's
Here
here.
or at Mendon-Upton. We do it at the administrative.
Well, we have strategic planning till 6. There's a CPAC meeting for anyone who's going to go to that from 6 to 7:30 here following the strategic planning. That's why I put it at 7:30. So I would say here. That works. We could, I'll see if it's in the gathering room or come in here.
Make a night of it.
But this time, did I share the link? I didn't see it.
I think you shared it in.
Oh, I already shared it with you. Okay, yeah, I
Friday.
did, yeah. So I can reshare that again this week, but you have it in the memo I sent you, so then you can start to look through and get a sense. And then I think I shared with you who had received it in the past years, just so you know that as well. And then we'll be kind of maybe more prepared heading into that, so it can be an efficient meeting too. Great, thank you.
All right. Jenna, okay, are there any other matters that were not anticipated by the committee within 48 hours of the posted meeting? And then correspondence. We did receive a letter today from Gary Ellis. Sounds like he's a retired custodian, just thanking the district. And, so really nice of Gary to reach out upon his retirement. We should be thanking him, because I know that's not an easy role at all the time, and certainly underappreciated at times, but very nice to receive this letter from Gary. All right, and then for future agenda items, we've got the reorg of the school committee, which I guess we can do after we get through the Mendon elections. We're gonna review district goals, and then we'll receive, I guess, a first pass of the facilities assessment presentation. So, if there's nothing else, we can take a motion to adjourn.
Motion adjourned.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
And we are adjourned at 8:50.